Okay, the next video in this series of scientific writing tips is actually on doing the writing and how do we get started and how do we get rolling with actually writing. First, get started now. I'm sure a lot of you have watched these past couple videos, or maybe right now, maybe thinking, I'm not good at it, I'm not good at writing, or it's a waste of my time, I'm a clinician. Why do I need to write? I should just be doing soap notes. And I'm sure that's what some of you are thinking, or maybe all 17 of you are thinking. But what I hope you think is that writing and getting started writing now, it's a contribution to effective science, and it's essential for your career and your community. So you are the first class of going to be, fingers crossed, accredited DAT students in the country. So you will be leaders. And it's essential that you represent what a DAT is all about, and being an active scholar is part of that. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be publishing every year or every 2 years, but you need to be steeped in the literature, and if you have something to share, you should share it. And also to the community in general, how can you improve athletic training as a whole, beyond yourself, kind of altruistically improve athletic training for those around you and future generations of athletic training. I hope you think that you'll find the time and resources to craft your own writing. Writing is a skill, and writing is a craft. It's not something that you can watch these videos and be good at it. It takes practice. It's just like learning how to shoot a free throw or learning how to write your name when you were a kid. I'm sure your mom or your dad or your grandma or your grandpa or whoever your caretaker was, you set your teacher when you sat in the classroom in kindergarten and you wrote your A's on the dotted lines, and you had to write 20 capital A's and 20 little A's, and then you may have learned cursive, and that was a whole different thing. So it takes practice. And just watching it once and doing it one time, you're not going to be good at it at first. You're not going to be great at it at first. It's going to take a lot of time. And finally, you couldn't bear to see your name associated with something of poor quality. I hope that's what you're thinking, because pride has a lot to do with writing, and writing has a lot to do with pride. So I hope that if you turn in something, you couldn't bear to see your name associated with something that's of poor quality. And one of the major issues that we have as writers is writer's block. And even the most positive scientists or positive writers will suffer from writer's block at some point. There are several ways we can overcome this. The first one is to gather sufficient information and gather sufficient data. Oftentimes, authors have not conducted sufficient research to make their conclusions, so they didn't meet their end. But rest assured, at Indiana State, we do a power analysis prior, so we know exactly how many participants you need. But still, sometimes you don't have enough data to make your conclusions. Or also, you have problems actually. You have problems looking up the background information, or you haven't done sufficient background information, so you're not quite sure what's out there. So when you gather this information, you want to make sure you set definable and practical goals. I know we did this in clinical class, setting goals, but you need to make short-term goals in your writing. So today I want to write a sentence. Today I want to write a paragraph. Today I want to look up 3 journal articles. Tomorrow I want to summarize one of those 3. You need to make sure you write your own goals, and I'm not going to be there babysitting you, and your classmates aren't going to be there babysitting you. This is going to have to be self-regulated. Now, if you want to create a writing group, so maybe 3 or 4 of you get together, you have similar interests, maybe you use Dr. Everman's Help Wanted project as individuals who may work well with you, and you guys get together on your own and you set deadlines like, okay, this week everyone, let's get 5 articles done and summarize them, and essentially create a small accountability group to help yourselves move forward. So I think that's a great idea, but that's really going to be on your own, and that's really important to avoid writer's block throughout this entire semester and throughout the entire program. Define the writing task specifically, or what you specifically want to write about. Whom, what level, and how detailed. For this semester, maybe what you want to make sure you keep in focus is that this is a research proposal, and I could be using this for the future. I may not be using it for the future if it's a project that's not feasible, or if it's a project that maybe by the end of the semester you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. But think about who you're writing this for. You're writing this for the scientific community of your classmates, and for myself, Dr. Reed, Dr. Armstrong, Dr. Idlewine, the rest of the AT faculty here at Indiana State. What level? This should be written at a graduate level. How detailed? As detailed as it needs to be. Finally, you want to organize your material. Creating outlines is like the one thing that has helped me so much in terms of writing and avoiding writer's block. And you need to make sure that it's not just details like introduction, methods, results, discussion. You want to put introduction. You want to talk about injury rates. Then you want to talk about current evidence looking at strength. Current evidence talk about flexibility, holes in the literature, and then finally your point. You want to make sure it's very detailed. The more detailed your outline is, if you use short bullet points, the easier it is going to be to when you get down to the writing, because you have your subjects of each sentence essentially laid out for you, and then you just kind of tie it together with some transitions, and you make it sound good, and you're ready to go. So developing strong outlines are really, really important. As we move on, other ways to avoid writer's block is to discuss the work. Have meetings with, if you have other athletic trainers in the DAT at your or any other athletic trainers at all. Maybe not necessarily in the DAT, but if you have other athletic trainers around you, have meetings with them. Set up lab meetings. I hope that's what we can use with some of our discussions in 691 for synchronous sessions and on our discussion boards. I mean, you guys have done an amazing job talking about your work. Maybe do some journal clubs. Sit down with colleagues, friends, whoever will listen. Your grandma, your dog Bo. Sit down, listen to, talk with them, and keep that constantly in your head, and that's going to help your writing. For the visual learners, and actually for all learners and all of you, sketching out your writing is really has worked really well for me. And I've read some other literature that suggests that actually making like a concept map and seeing how all your key topics link together helps create a really solid writing environment, and really helps you look concretely at your writing in order to be logical when you get down in writing. And that's where a lot of the times we struggle with writer's block, because we think, I don't even know where to start. Well, if you can see the relationships between different things visually, or using a sketchboard or storyboard, and these don't have to be Picasso level drawings, you can really make those connections as you start writing. Create a conducive work environment. Where do you work best? Do you work best in a coffee shop? Do you work best in a completely quiet room? Do you have to be at home? Do you not have to be at home? For me, I do not like to write at home. I feel like I have too many distractions, and honestly, I do not like to write in the office either, because when I write in the office, I keep my door open because it's an open door policy, and I get distracted. I like to write at a coffee shop where I have some background noise, and I put a out of office reminder on my email. I turn my phone off, and I just get down to business. Now, I always have the distraction of Facebook or Twitter or the internet, so that really takes some planning and actually to put that away. But finding what work environment works best for you. Maybe for you it works best to be, out in a field with some internet access in the middle of campus. Maybe that's what's best for you. Maybe it's a smoky bar. I don't know. But find what works best for you, and that will lead to some better writing. You also need to remember that the first draft is not the final draft. You are going to get multiple revisions, multiple suggestions throughout the entire process. And so it doesn't have to be perfect at first. You can either literally have writing and then put, I don't know what I'm talking about, and leave that blank, and then continue writing the next paragraph. There's no great writing. There's only great rewriting. I can't remember who said that. It was some famous author who essentially is making the point that no one ever wrote a great first draft. No one ever got their first draft published. And you shouldn't approach it that way either. And I know in your English classes in college and in grad school and in high school, you may have gotten into the habit of waiting to the last minute and just turning in one. And then that was it. Or, again, clicking edit, grammar check, spell check, and then turn it in. Really, really focus on constantly revisiting your work and taking into account the feedback. And that's going to help you avoid writer's block in the future, in your future iterations. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is the write while you work idea. So when you're collecting your data, whatever your project is, make sure you're writing. Okay, take notes on computers, notepads, memo pads, your voice memos on your phone, and kind of organize. And why would you want to do this? Okay, well, when you write down stuff or you make virtual notes, you have to face your logic or lack thereof. Okay, so when you're writing, and if you have to face, is what I'm asking, is what I'm measuring what I'm really asking, is the way I'm measuring it what I really need to be doing. So you're faced to look at this information before you get all the way through. And when you commit to different recipes, or methodologies, etc., on paper, you're forced to record all the details. So you can't just skip over it and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this. You need to, when you write it down, you have to look at every single detail. Oh crap, I forgot to take the person's height or the person's weight. When you write it down and when you're doing the process, it's much easier to connect the doing, the psychomotor component of it, with the writing, and that will improve your writing in the end. And finally, when you look at your skimpy reference list, it may embarrass you enough to do some more background research. So if you're writing and you're writing while you work, and you have this like maybe 10, 20, only 20 resources, and if you're like cringing when I say only 20 references, well, get ready to amp it up a little bit here. 20 references is hardly enough to get out what you want to say, particularly if you're doing a literature review. So I remember in my dissertation I had 375 plus references. Now I'm not saying you're going to need that much for your research projects, but that gives you an idea of the depth and the type of research and background information you're going to need. So with that, that concludes our doing the writing portion of our three-step video, or three-step videos. So I guess the last piece of advice I have is get writing.